So good evening, everybody. We are very excited to have you here for our Next Gen Changemaker session. This is an opportunity for us to connect and really learn from not just our Next Gen Changemakers in the making, all of you, but also to think through what are some of the things we need in our lives and in this moment to kind of move forward in a way that makes sense for this climate, but also to keep ourselves and our communities well. So I'm going to ask our panelists to go through and introduce themselves. They'll share a little bit about their past and then also a little bit about what work they're actually excited about in this moment. And then we will make sure that we have a chance to really chat through some of the great opportunities coming up. All right, so I will pass it to our panelist, Ariana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to join you all today. I am joining you from the Bay Area in California, and I graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 2019. While I was at Hugsy, I was the Undocumented Allies co-chair. I also worked in the Student Affairs Office, and I'm currently an educational consultant in the Bay Area. So really happy to be here. I'm also a first-gen DACA recipient and community college transfer student.
Thank you, Ariana. And Peter?
Hey, everyone. I am not a Harvard grad. I went to BC undergrad. I went to BU Law, did Teach for America in Houston for 2 years, and then taught in Boston Public Schools for 3 years. I'm originally from Boston. I'm in Boston currently as well. I am currently, my full-time job is private equity mergers and acquisitions attorney, but I'm also chair of a nonprofit called Union Capital Boston, where we reward community and civic engagement with actual dollars.
Thank you for being here and being a leader in our community and our local Boston area community, and we're really excited to have you. And we have Laura.
Of course, I'm on mute. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Cuellar. I am originally from Colombia and grew up in the East LA area. So shout out to the West Coast, the best coast. And I spent most of my career before coming to Harvard Graduate School of Education in youth organizing, youth leadership, and I became like a coalition builder in the fields of like advocacy and also college access in Los Angeles. And that really inspired me to get my master's in education policy, because as much as I was really like grinding and hustling and working hard with students and parents, I knew that there was just bigger systemic inequalities going on that I could not address just by myself. And so I graduated in May 2020 from the ed school, and I got my degree in education policy. And now we're actually working at the Mayor's Office of Education in the city of Houston. And I am working on a program from UNICEF called the Child Friendly Cities Initiative. So it's nothing new, but you might not have heard of it, because even though it's in 3,500 cities across the world, it's the first time the United States is doing it. So there's 4 pilot cities: Houston, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and another city and a county in Maryland.
Wonderful. And Leslie?
Good morning, buenas tardes, good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Jimenez. I am a proud first-generation Mexican-American from Compton, California. So Laura, West Coast, woo-woo. I am currently a doctoral resident, specifically in the Doctor of Education Leadership program at the Grad School of Education. So it was nice to hear Laura and Ariana, my fellow comadres at the ed school. And I'm super excited to be here with everyone today. And in addition to having an opportunity to have been at that school with Ariana and Laura, I also am a member of the Next Gen Leadership Team with Evelyn and Amanda. And nice to meet you, Peter and Katie and Akil.
Yeah, so during this time, we're getting a chance to kind of pick your brains. You've tackled a range of issues, you've had a range of life experiences. And so one of the first things that I wanted to hope that we could have a conversation about is just how did you cultivate this sense of purpose and keep partnerships in your life to create new possibilities for yourself as Next Gen or not, and your community going forward. So some questions to consider.
I can start, yeah. So first of all, everyone is a partner. Everybody has the potential of being a partner regardless of their education status, regardless of their documentation status, regardless of what job they have. I think sometimes when we are raised in a more, capitalistic system with white supremacy values, we're thinking of like the person on the top. That's my mentor, but anybody can really be an amazing partner. And I found some of my best partnerships from people that were younger than me, youth, as well as undocumented parents from Los Angeles. So I really wanted to just emphasize that. And then the second thing in terms of cultivating purpose, um, well, those key partnerships are going to happen when you listen. And when you listen to these partners, that's when you will find your purpose because they will tell you what they need. You do not need to come in and solve their problems for them. They actually tell you what they need and they also tell you how to solve it a lot of the times. So that's really how you kind of strengthen those partnerships because when people feel listened to, that's when they really start giving and you start not only taking from them, but you're also giving to them as well. And it becomes a more collaborative process.
Thank you.
I'd echo a lot of that. I am first generation as well. I am first generation American and first generation college student. My mother is from Dominican Republic. My father is Puerto Rican. So I want to echo a lot of that. It is really, it doesn't matter where someone's from. You really should be kind of invested in everyone. And I say that throughout your life, right? You're going into college right now. I think number one, keeping in touch with your classmates. I think as a first generation American, one thing during college that I didn't do was kind of keeping stay open with some people. I think as a person of color, a lot of times, and as a first generation college student, you put up walls or a first generation grad student, you put up walls and you don't necessarily kind of talk to or really mess with most people. I say you can still do that because I think there's always a risk in putting yourself out there to majority groups, to white students. You can still keep those walls up, but I actually think you can keep those walls up, but keep the communication flowing and keeping in touch with people is very different. I think a lot of times we take our relationships very serious and intimately, and you don't got to bring everyone into that level of intimacy, right? You don't have to do that. Kind of the majoritarian kind of, if we're going to say like white supremacist system, or when you're in those cultural systems and you're there, the way that people keep in touch is a little more kind of vague than that. Like, oh, like maybe you send them an email, maybe you just saw them on LinkedIn. Oh, you did this, it was cool. That's keeping your relationships warm. And I think what's important there is you want people to maybe think about you when an opportunity comes up, no matter what walk of life they're from. It can be anyone, right? I've had opportunities come to me from people that didn't go to college, that did go to college. It doesn't matter. There's always someone that can do something for you. And I think the key is you got to do things for people. I'm a people connector. I think it's important to connect people with one another with nothing for me at stake. Hey, I know you like this. I know someone that you should definitely talk to. They're into this industry, and kind of making cross-cultural or kind of making people connect, and also creating mentorships with people, like amongst people, like, oh, you want to go and you're doing tech right now. Oh, I know someone that does that. Like, you guys should talk about like what you're interested in. You know what happens? That person that I introduced someone else to ends up hitting me up and saying, hey man, like I have this deal, or hey man, I got this, this board seat, or I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. And then you kind of start to have a dialogue. I think that's the way you need to think about kind of keeping networks fresh and keeping people kind of in the loop. And I say that too, it's something I've learned along the way. I do things like an update email sometimes to different people, from professors, people I haven't gotten in touch with. It's kind of like that reconnect, like reconnecting with someone. You update them, hey, I just had my, my third kid, and this and that. This is what I'm doing in my job right now. They start to keep you top of mind. They say, hey, are you trying to change jobs? Are you trying to do X, Y, and Z? Are you trying to move? Are you, people start to think about you and ask you questions and put your kind of, maybe you're not looking for something, but maybe you know someone that is, and maybe you can make another connection for someone. I think always keeping that going is important. The second thing is purpose. I think it's just a lifelong project. I think finding purpose is something you got to keep taking the temperature of and thinking about what you want and need at any given time. And I think try to do it before you get unhappy. When you're
That's a good
unhappy,
one,
it's
yeah.
harder to kind of make the changes that you want. I think it's easier to kind of make the leap when you're satisfied. When you're unhappy, you can give off a little bit of desperation when you're trying to change career trajectory, but also just change trajectory. You want to move, you want to do something different, you want to go back to school. You need to just kind of think about it when you're still happy with where you are. So it should be a lifelong kind of always thinking about like what's next.
I love that. I love the way that we're thinking about that both Laura and Peter are kind of really emphasizing the role of relationships, of listening, of it being reciprocal, of it being intentional about like sending these updates and really building it on foundation of our connections. And I would venture to say that Next Gen Superpower for sure is about building those connections. We are rooted in this communal. A lot of us are rooted in this community, and we learned where to hold on to and who to connect with, and we do that for our colleagues. But you did mention this thing of like sending that email to be top of mind, which brings us to the very practical aspects of what does it mean to be a change maker. You move with others, but also like what are the strategies to expand those horizons? So like maybe it's sending that email, but I don't know if Leslie or Ariana, if you want to talk about the 1 to 2 strategies that you might like to use to expand your areas of influence and day-to-day routines.
I can go. And my strategy is to maintain the relationship. So not only building your network, but maintaining that. And I think Dr. Anthony Jack at the Ed School always emphasizes this, that it's important to maintain and stay in touch, like what Peter said. But it's also important to cultivate it long term, right? So for example, I recently got a consulting gig, and this was from someone that has known me from maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I've stayed in touch via social media, via LinkedIn or via Facebook, or just, we kind of have been watching each other's, professional growth. And that person reached out and said, hey, I'm not sure if you're in the area, if you're interested, but there's this, opportunity, and I thought about you. I'm like, great. So making sure to follow up via email, making sure you keep your word, right? If I'm going to call that person at that designated time. And I think it's just a matter of, like what Peter and both Laura said is just, it's a give and take. It's, and I'm all about networking as well, connecting people and expanding their world. So I'd say that like maintaining the relationships is very important.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I really appreciate what you all have shared. And I know that like networking, can sound like an icky word, because to be honest, like I was like, I don't want to network, right? Like I didn't really like the idea of it, because it just felt like so, kind of like I want something from them, right? It just felt like so transactional. But it was interesting. I had one of my mentors, I had a conversation with him, and I love the way he reframed it. And I love how everyone's shaping it, because ultimately it is a relationship you're building, right? It's not that you're networking just because, is that you're building like true, like really intentional relationships because these people share the same passions that you do or have the same interests that you do. And so like one strategy that I would highly recommend is be okay reaching out to people. Like I know that I've done like cold emails and or even ask like my friends, my mentors, like, hey, I really want to focus on X, you know, are there some people that you think that I should talk to? And, you know, because these are your mentors, your friends, right? Like these are people you trust. So you know that they're connecting you with like good people, right? And then once you connect, you know, and you share that connection, you know, like it just becomes sort of like automatic from then on. And so it's not really networking anymore, right? It's just like creating and forming this beautiful relationship with another person who has the same interest as you do. And what's beautiful about that is that it's no longer sort of like, what can I do for you that you can do for me? It's like, hey, you know what? I love that you love that too. Let's work on this together. And so it becomes more of a collaboration. So I would say one strategy would be to be okay letting people know what you're interested in, what you want to focus on, what you want to learn about, and then, you know, have people suggest who to connect with and definitely follow those leads. And all that to say, like, sometimes those relationships like are amazing. And sometimes, you know, even though you may communicate and follow up, you know, on the other end, they may not follow through, and that's okay, right? Because it's all about just like, you know, making those connections and being okay, like putting yourself out there. And I know, again, that could sound scary, but trust me, you will find some amazing, amazing people. I think that's how I found actually the majority of the people on here. So be okay to connect, especially through that passion that you have, because if anything, at least you have that passion in common.
So we're really trying to think of, strategies for staying engaged, but also thinking about like, we're all passionate people. We want to tackle and change the world. And, to be an effective change maker, how do we actually decide which problems are worth tackling and which ones we have not just the passion for, but the resources for? And so I don't know if any of you have some thoughts on how to navigate which problems do we actually take on?
Sure, I can start again. So I think when I was working with youth very closely and mentoring, they would always tell me, and I think I felt like this, and I still feel like this sometimes, there's so many problems that I'm really passionate about. Like, how do I pick, so when you said that question, it made me think of those moments where I was talking to youth. I'm like, yeah, there's all kinds of problems in the world. And so how do we identify the right problem, right? So I think the first thing I have here is be flexible. I think COVID has really taught us to challenge, what is normal, challenge, what's our comfort zone, right? None of us, I think, are on our comfort zone right now necessarily, especially if you're quarantined or, you've maybe lost your job or like in the job search still. And so I think the good thing about being first gen is that most of us come from underprivileged communities. Most of us have come from a lot of trauma. So we are very used to figuring it out. We have to in order to survive. And so that's the good news. The bad news about being first gen sometimes is that, especially those that are like high achieving and you all made it to Harvard, right? Is then you have to be perfect. You have to know every step of the way. You have to make the right connections. You have to network with this person. You have to do this and that, and you have to reach certain milestones at certain times of my life, And I think that's kind of too tough on us, And it's tough in a world that is filled with challenges, especially if you're first gen or low income or minority. But it's also just impossible. We cannot just have our plan for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We can have ideas and we should definitely aim to have plans, but I think just staying flexible. And so the reason I say that is because sometimes we're really passionate about I want to help first generation youth get into college, right? And I think this is the best way. But when you start kind of really meeting the folks in the community, they actually tell you different things. So I know I was first gen and documented and, I had my set of issues. However, when I met other first gen or when I met other low income folks, they had different type of issues that needed different solutions. And especially men of color. Men of color, I had a hard time sometimes counseling or mentoring because yes, we came from similar backgrounds, but they were men, they were different. And so I needed to sit down and listen to them and stay flexible with what I thought were the solutions. So I think that's really important. And then the last two things is building the people that are going to help you solve. There's people are going to help you find the right problem. And so the way you do that is by building networks. But I don't think we talked about being networking being an icky word. Well, it's an icky word when you're networking with people that you don't care about. But if you truly care about people, it's more than networking. It's like, I want to help you out. And so I think thinking about networking in that way, right, it's kind of like an organizer. You don't think about like, how can I get this person to get to the next step? Like, no, you're thinking like, how do I support my community? How do I help my peer to get to the next level, right? And then the last thing I'll say is be willing to work for free. I know that is a controversial topic, especially if you're low income and first gen. It doesn't mean that you have a full-time job that you're working for free. No, you can always have your side hustle where you're getting your money and everybody needs their bread. That's really true. But then also have, if you, for example, want to be a record company CEO, you're not going to be there right after Harvard. It's going to take you some time, some networking, some experience. So be willing to maybe volunteer at a record company first and then work your way up. And then maybe you are going to have some side hustles where you're not really working on your passion. You could, but you're also like, you have to pay rent, right? But I think that that's how I've gotten where I've gotten, is I've been willing to do some things for free.
Really powerful stuff. I think this is a very interesting topic too, because the Next Gen Initiative is a lot of work that we're doing is, you know, for our institution, for our community, and is not necessarily part of our official job, but we want to tackle this problem because we know that there's a need. So thank you for giving us confirmation of that. Anyone else?
I can go. Laura, I just really appreciate what you shared, because I think it also made me think about, to be honest, like one of the things that I also suffer from. So I'm letting everyone know, take all this with a grain of salt. But, you know, FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is real, right? You're just like, oh, if I don't participate in this cause, if I don't go to this event, if I don't donate, if I don't go volunteer, like you feel like I'm not helping out, I'm not doing, you know, I'm not helping out my community, I'm not supporting them. But just know that there are different opportunities, there are different times, there's different ways that you can actually, like, you know, help support, especially if you feel like there is a problem that you're passionate about. So one of the things that I'm starting to do myself, which I have found really helpful, and I would encourage others to also try out, is like really think like, you know, does this align to my core values? Is this something that I'm passionate about? Is this something that, you know, will help me grow, like as a person, as an individual, as a member of this community? You know, am I, you know, do I feel that like this is something that is going to, at the end of the day, like help me feel fulfilled as a person? You know, that I actually feel that I'm helping out someone else. Like, you know, really ask yourself these deep questions, and I would say use that as kind of like your compass to be like, okay, you know, do I really need to go, or do I just think like that I need to go, right? And I feel like those are two separate things. And so again, just remember that there are different opportunities, different times, and different ways to participate. You can donate money, you could donate time, you could donate resources, you can read a book, you can read to others, you can write a blog, you can have a conversation with someone. Like there's different ways, again, to support, but again, really ask yourself, like, is this something that aligns to my core values? And is this something that will help me and others grow? And again, FOMO is real, so I definitely understand. But again, know that there are different ways, times, and opportunities, and ways to support.
You just said something. I just wanted to add that I think one of the things a lot of first generation students are dealing with is a lot of family struggle too, and having to support family and do things for family. And the FOMO of like wanting to be involved and have your hands in a lot of pots, you know, for every cause. I think the best suggestion I have is like get in where you fit in, with what you are passionate about, what you like. You don't have to be everything about, you don't have to know everything about everything. you know, find your passion, what you like, stay with an open mind for other things too. And, you know, but don't get scared. Like, I didn't go to this march, I didn't do to this one, I didn't go to, you know, this event, and now I'm feeling, no, you're not going to have that much time. If you're a first generation student, you probably not only have your community, your family, and a lot of different things you're interested in. Never mind if you have like a 9 to 5 or sometimes even longer. Like, I have a job that doesn't really have anything to do with like, you know, the nonprofit that I'm the chair of, right? Like, I'm a private equity lawyer, but at the same time, I put a lot of work and time into doing kind of the civic engagement and community engagement work with the nonprofit. And so people need to learn how to like marry those things and balance things. I even had to take commitments off of other nonprofit boards in order to put more time on the one I'm doing now, because I feel like that's where I fit in. So I think people need to juggle, and there's different seasons for different things. Sometimes you're not going to be as available or as engaged, and maybe you got to put your head down and focus on whatever your 9 to 5 is for a while and your family, and then you got to go and do something else, right? You know, I think I just want people to feel like when they hear it, not feel too stressed out, because I think that is true. People do feel like they got to do everything. And Laura, I really appreciated that point about men of color and the differences, because I think a lot of times, like, even though if you have a sister or a cousin that lives in the same neighborhood as you, your experience is so different. Like, you're not gonna get, you know, into a fight because you know, somebody snitched or you looked at each other on the bus and now you're fighting somebody. Like, it's just a different life. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing these perspectives together and for helping us get a lot of good advice in a small amount of time. There are a lot of problems out there, a lot of challenges, and we're facing one coming up for the November election in terms of whose voice is going to really be amplified at this time, and how do we ensure, you know, that we're doing our part, and is it important that we do our part, and also what does that part look like? Not everybody can vote, not everybody can, you know, go out and exercise their right to be a part of the franchise in this way, and that's a privilege, but also there's like a ton of voter suppression happening. So how do we even, where do we even start, and how do we, you know, make sure that we prioritize being engaged?
Well, as an undocumented DACA recipient individual, I've been politically active, ironically, because it's something that affects me directly. You know, the policies that are implemented, you know, by local officials or the current president affect me. And it's something that I'm constantly having to educate myself on, so that I'm sure that I'm following the appropriate measures, you know, the steps that I'm covered. And so for me, I'm always encouraging my family members who are U.S. citizens, reminding them to vote, to look at the local, you know, policies, to look at their local elected officials, and get informed about what are they going to do, what are they about, what do they stand for, and so that we can then eventually hold them accountable, right? And I have friends who have, you know, are in between about who to choose for president, right? And I'm like, choose someone, because not choosing someone is going, that vote is going for the current individual in the office, in the White House. So for me, it's like, look locally, encourage your family and friends to vote, help them look at the props, right? And yeah, it's a learning, you know, for me as well, because I eventually do want to become a U.S. citizen and exercise that right. So I would like to exercise that right now, but I can't. So let me do what's within my control, right? And get everyone to vote and tell them how important it is and remind them.
Thank you, Ariana.
So in my nonprofit that I chair, Union Capital Boston, we do things like, we have over 2,000 members in the greater Boston area, and we'll actually phone bank swing states. We do it in a family kind of way, like people put together lists of family that they have in swing states. A lot of our members are undocumented too. So really interesting anecdote. One of our members actually said once, you know, I'm undocumented. and I can't vote. But when I go to a politician and I'm talking to them and I'm like, I'm a member of the community, you talk to me, because we kind of have our members become leaders. And so she's one of our leaders. And she basically goes to politicians and talks to them like that. And she's like, I could get 100 votes for you. I can go and do that work. I know my community and I know the people here and I know who's citizens. I can't vote, so you'd miss out on this vote, but I can get 100 more. And so we kind of use that a little bit as our mantra. Like, even some of our people can't vote. Some of them are American citizens, but can't vote in, Florida, but their cousins can. So it's kind of doing that work, using that kind of family engagement, where people are just, we're not telling you to cold call strangers. I think that's difficult sometimes, even for me. I've done it before, right? But calling your family and just checking in and saying, hey, do you need help with your ballot? Do you know, where your early voting times are? Do you know, how to order a ballot by mail? Do you know you can drop it off? Just giving them kind of the information. Are you registered to vote? I had a brother-in-law that wasn't registered to vote. I helped them go through it and get registered to vote in Florida. Things that I didn't even know. I would have just assumed that he was registered. He got his license there and he was registered. He wasn't. And so I think it's kind of challenging yourself to just communicate with people in your family, friends as well. Friends from elementary school I saw on Facebook. I'm like, oh, so-and-so lives in North Carolina. How are you doing? You need any help with voting? I think it's just that simple. And if everyone commits to do 10 or 15 of those, I think you'd be surprised at how many you have and how we could help our friends and family that are undocumented, right? And it's just, the stakes are very high right now. They're very high for higher education, for first generation college student programming, upward bounds, funding for things like that. McNair Scholars, a whole bunch of programs, and DACA. I mean, when you think of all these things in the aggregate, healthcare, immigration, education, the environment, the stakes are very high, and the courts, we just have to really get all hands on deck and get really engaged.
Thank you. Yes, and it is that time where we're coming up on 18 days, less than 20 days into the election. It's not too late. There's time to make a voting plan, and you will see on our website that you'll be able to kind of tag and take a pledge. We're going to be supporting our first generation former First Lady, Michelle Obama, and there's some really great resources on when we all vote. There's also the Harvard Votes Challenge, which has a lot of great resources. You can use Turbo Vote to kind of help make sure that your address and your ballot is deliverable, and or you have all the resources you need to go in person with proper COVID precautions. So definitely, thank you so much for tuning in, for watching this, for being a part of this panel. We are so grateful to everyone here for their time, for their expertise, and just their encouragement to keep doing what we're doing and to keep growing as change makers in this time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.